it's important to leave doors open, if you will, to keep oil in your lamp. Because you never know when things that you think are going to be lost wind up coming back around. Sometimes relationships that you thought you lost forever wind up resurrecting themselves when you least expect them. And yet, we can also sometimes fall into the trap of living in the past. We can be so determined to see things the way we want them to be that we don't actually have the courage to face the reality of what they are. And I'm reminded of something I heard once. It's been said, don't try to swim across the ocean for somebody who isn't willing to cross a puddle for you. Sometimes we can deceive ourselves and we can think, well, if I just build more than my share of the bridge, if I go out there and I am willing to pay any price and bear any burden for something that I want or something that I love or something that I believe in, then my devotion is going to be rewarded, because whoever or whatever I sacrifice of myself for will in turn eventually come back and give me a return on that investment. That's something we think about jobs. We think about relationships that way. We think if we sacrifice on the front side for something that ultimately hasn't really given us very much, that eventually it will bear fruit and give us more. But the truth is that usually things are exactly what they appear to be. And if somebody is not willing to demonstrate faithfulness and commitment, no amount of trying to demonstrate faithfulness and commitment in overdrive is going to make them be something that they're not. And you can blame yourself and say, well, if I just said something different, or if I just gave a little bit more at the right time, then it would be different. But that's not the truth. The truth is that you don't have to make a case for, proving to yourself that you're respected. If you really are respected, it's going to be obvious. And it's not going to be something that you have to remind yourself of and try to prove that it is the case. So, on one hand, I'm saying that we should be willing to have doors open, because if you close doors all the time, then maybe you miss opportunities for good things that will come your way. But if you are always trying to pry open doors that are closed, that can be disappointing as well. So there's a balance to be found there. And I think both sides of this paradigm are important to understand. You've got to be willing to keep doors open, because if you're bitter and you're always saying, well, nobody's on my side and I'm going to prove a point to other people by slamming the door in somebody's face and saying, well, never again, or something like that. Well, nothing good ever comes from a place of vengefulness or bitterness or frustration or anything like that. And sometimes we think that good people always do good things and bad people always do bad things, and there's no way to have somebody cross from one category into the other. And that's also unfair and not true. You can have somebody who does good things, somebody who's in many ways amazing and elegant and beautiful and gracious and loving, and then that same person can do things that are cruel and toxic and harmful. And maybe in one context they are a good person, and in a different context they're not. And the fact that they have done bad things doesn't negate the good that they have in them, nor do good things that people have as attributes automatically excuse bad things that they might wind up doing. So we have to be pragmatic about this and understand that people have their demons, they have their reasons, they have their motives, they have their bad habits, they have all of these different things going on, and we should always forgive them for that. And we should always be open to the possibility that what a person was yesterday doesn't automatically dictate what they're going to be today. But then we also should protect ourselves first, because if you're talking about doing something that's going to put your personal security or progress at risk, and you're going to do that for somebody who's not really invested in you at all, well, then you're lying to yourself. Because what you really should do is make it clear that the door's open, that you're willing to be there for them. And yet that does not mean that you are going to be putting the first foot forward in the absence of their good faith. You can have an openness to say, I'm willing to be there for you. I'm willing to make sacrifices if you demonstrate good faith. I have an active interest in you, and you matter to me. But my well-being comes first. And while I can declare my intention of good faith, ultimately, in order to make valid a contract of faithfulness, it has to go both ways. And that can be a hard lesson to learn, because we do like to cling to our vision of how we want things to be. And sometimes we see the way we want things to be more clearly than the way they really are. And we look at everything through that lens and try to kind of make excuses for things that shouldn't be excused. And that's something we got to be careful of, because while you don't want to be bitter, closing doors on things, you also don't want to be so determined to believe the best that you're always living in the past. You're always obsessed with something working out that never could work out. You know, there's this story in an episode of The Walking Dead, and they were all out there making their way through the wilderness, and there was this guy who is the mayor of a settlement, and he, on the surface, he seemed like he was a good guy, nice guy. But then it turns out he had a zombie locked up, chained up in his bedroom. And it was his dead daughter. And of course, this man had loved his daughter. And then she died. And she came back as a zombie. And he couldn't accept the fact that she was dead and her spirit was gone. So he continued to keep her in a zombie form, chained up in his house. And he would talk to her, and he would feed her flesh, and he would not give up that hope he was clinging to. And it was tragic because on one hand, he loved his daughter, but on the other hand, he couldn't be a good man when he was delusional in that way. And it's kind of like that with things we cling to in life. It's good to be faithful to things, but there's a point at which reality has to prevail. And if we are so determined to love things through the lens of what we want them to be instead of the truth of what they are, we can be like that guy, and we can have these demons in the closet that we refuse to move on from because we don't want to concede that they aren't what they used to be, or they aren't what we want them to be. So it's good to let things go and surrender them. Surrendering things, I think, is the greatest test that the universe can throw at us. Sometimes, in order to find the things we need, we have to surrender the things we want. And sometimes we don't know exactly what finding the things we need actually looks like, because we might have an idea of what it is we need in life, and yet it's kind of like wanting to bring back the dead. That might be what you think you want to do, but it can't be done without unintended consequences that aren't good. Sometimes the dead are meant to rest, and we are meant to move past them. However sad that might be, sometimes that's what's right for all parties involved. So always be open to hope, but don't stake your life today on things that are past. Always seek to have joy in your life, regardless of how things turn out. Don't peg your hope for tomorrow on things that you can't control today. And whatever happens, trust that if a door closes, a window somewhere will open. It's okay to lose one thing in favor of finding something else. Wherever your journey takes you, best wishes, as always. Till next time.